The question is, why would Marion fall in love with an asshole like Harold Hill?
This is the Gospel of Musical Theater, a priestly look at some of your favorite musicals, with your hosts, Cathedral Deans and Musical Theater Queens, Nathan LaRude and Peter Elliott.
This is Gospel of Musical Theater. I'm Peter.
I'm Nathan.
And this is our summer series of more relaxed conversation, I guess.
Do we ever have non-relaxed conversation?
Never. It's always relaxed.
Relaxed around here.
We want to talk about Music Man today, The Music Man by Harold Willson.
Which is one of it's one of your favorite shows. It's one of my favorite shows.
It's one of my favorite shows.
I love The Music Man. I will, it is a beloved show for me.
I will see it again and again. Every production, even a bad production is good production.
Even a bad production, I agree. I still cry. Actually, even sometimes, especially in like a bad high school production where it's all these like 14, 15, 16-year-olds like trying their best to play this material. And something about the show is so earnest, and bad productions of The Music Man tend to be very earnest. And that, it moves me to tears every time I see a production of The Music Man. It really works for me.
So we're in the year 1957 when the show finally reached Broadway after Meredith Willson and his wife, whose first name escapes me.
Rini. I think she's Russian. Yeah. Rini Willson, yeah. Who sounds like, the original Marion the Librarian, she's a force in this thing. I would love to know more about Rini Willson.
Yeah, and if you want to read more about it, Harold Wilson, why I keep saying that? Meredith Willson. Harold Wilson was the Prime Minister of England. Meredith Wilson's book called You Got to Know the Territory.
He doesn't know the territory, yeah.
Doesn't know the territory is worth it. Anyway, 1957 finally hits Broadway. 1,400 performances. Awarded the Tony for Best Musical in 1957, beating out West Side Story.
Yeah, to some people's everlasting chagrin and upsetness, anger. I think Music Man and West Side Story, fairly or unfairly, have been set. They're sort of the two siblings of 1957 American culture, and my sense is Music Man tends to be used as a scapegoat for everything that's wrong with America in 1957, whereas West Side Story is pushing us into the future. I think that's a little unfair to the Music Man in some ways, but it is interesting that these two shows are so linked in such interesting ways.
Robert Preston and I believe Barbara Cook originally. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
on Broadway, the great Robert. Then 1962, the movie released Shirley Jones playing Marion the Librarian. Robert Preston, who owned this role, made it. It's hard to. I've seen many Harold Hills, but in my mind, anyway, maybe you're a little better than me on this. I'm always comparing them with Robert Preston.
I agree. No one has managed. I saw clips of Hugh Jackman do it on Broadway, and I thought, nothing. Pretty to look at, but not Robert Preston. Matthew Broderick there's a Disney version with Matthew Broderick and Kristen Chenoweth as Marion the Librarian, and they acquit themselves pretty well. Actually, I like Matthew Broderick in the role. He brings there's an innocent quality to Matthew Broderick that it's Ferris Bueller, right? It's like sort of there's a kid in a candy shop sort of like glee in Matthew Broderick's performance. So it kind of cuts against let's talk about this as we get to it. The way in which Harold Hill is basically a liar and a cheat, and when the new production premiered in the era of Donald Trump, there were people saying, ought this to be a character that we valorize still, or is this basically the beginnings of Trumpian America? Is Harold Hill a stand-in for a man who just lies and can't stop lying? And you do kind of get the sense that Harold Hill, even when he's reformed, cannot stop making up stories. It is a little chilling.
It's very chilling.
And Robert Preston owns the role.
He owns the role. He inhabits it. He makes sleazy look attractive in some ways. Because not only is he a liar and a thief, he's also a philanderer and maybe even a serial sexual predator.
That's loading quite a lot into the Sadder but Wiser Girl, but not unfairly. We do wonder what the nature of his He says, piano teachers are my specialty. We get the sense that he has seduced many Marion the Librarians. And certainly knows how to use women to get ahead in terms of his economic. It's a piece of his work, I suppose. I mean, in that sense, he's almost a gigolo in a certain kind of way, which is a weird, kind of uncomfortable way to think about Harold Hill.
Well, the trope of the traveling salesman. I mean, when I was growing up, that's what all the dirty jokes were about. You know, a traveling salesman comes into town, and here he is. In that first scene, the overture, the beginning of the show, anticipates the rap of Lin-Manuel Miranda by about 50 years.
Yeah, speak sing is what Meredith Willson was really interested in experimenting with. I don't think that, I mean, there's no concept of rap yet, right? Like, so there's not he doesn't, but yeah, basically what he's doing is a kind of staged, very spoken, non-rhyming, which is different than rap, but non-rhyming kind of spoken dialogue with a little bit of a rhythmic undertow. I think his conception is people naturally speak in a kind of rhythmic way that he was interested in, we might say, musicalizing, which kind of, I mean, you know, is right next door to rap. It is a sort of performative speech in a really interesting sort of way. Yeah.
And the metronome, the timing of it is the train track,
right.
The traveling salesman on the train, a whole bunch of them gossiping, talking about their scams.
River City, next station stop. River City next. Cash for the merchandise. Cash for the button hooks.
Cash for the cotton goods. Cash for the hard goods.
Cash for the fancy goods. Cash for the soft goods.
Cash for the noggins and the piggins and the frickin'. Cash for the hogshead cask and jemmy jar.
Cash for the crackers and the pickles and the flypaper. Look, what do you talk? What do you talk? What do you talk? What do you talk? What do you talk?
Where do you get it?
What do you talk? You can talk, you can talk. You can bicker, you can talk. You can bicker, bicker, bicker. You can talk, you can talk. You can talk, 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 talk. Bicker, bicker, bicker. You can talk all you want, but it's different than it was.
No, it ain't. No, it ain't. But you gotta know the territory.
Why, it's the Model T Ford made the trouble, made the people want to go, want to get up and go. 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 22, 23 miles to the county seat.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who's going to patronize a little bitty 2x4 kind of store anymore?
What do you talk? What do you talk?
Where do you get it?
Not the Model T at all. Take a gander at the store, at the Modron store, at the present-day store, at the present-day Modron departmentalized grocery store.
What do you talk? What do you talk? What do you talk? What do you talk? What do you talk?
Where do you get it?
What do you talk? What do you talk? What do you talk?
Where do you get it?
You can talk, you can bicker, you can talk, you can bicker, you can talk, bicker, bicker, bicker. You can talk all you want, but it's different than it was.
No, it ain't, but you gotta know the territory.
Why, it's a you need a biscuit made the trouble. You need it. Put the crackers in the package,
And in my view, one of the best openings of a Broadway musical, an American songbook musical, maybe next to Ragtime, Hamilton, I would put right up in that panel B. It's Hadestown as well, but Music Man, you immediately know what era you're in, that Harold Hill is on the train, but you don't recognize him until he turns his suitcase around. Usually that's the
great reveal.
thing. And then you're into Iowa Stubborn, into this Norman Rockwell-like portrait of Americana.
Yeah. Well, but with an edge, right? I mean, I know that so much of the way that you and I think about this show, have used the show, and we've taught courses on race and class and, you know, kind of pulling apart Broadway musicals. You know, this show is all about whiteness, right? I mean, you know, and different productions will do different things, appropriately so, in a, you know, like my sense is most modern productions of The Music Man, you can't get away with an all-white stage. Although there's a piece of me that thinks, and this was some of the criticism of the most recent Broadway revival, which did kind of try to pretend that the all-white world that The Music Man gave in 1957 can be easily updated with some lyric changes and some different casting choices to be a sort of reflection of America the way that we want it to be now, which is like, you know, everybody has a different skin tone, but everybody is basically getting along, and race is not really an issue. So I'm not here to adjudicate those casting choices. I do think that The Music Man is pretty sharp-eyed in some interesting ways in the way that it gently parodies an all-white world in which conformity and not stepping out of... I mean, so it's interesting. The town is already basically a marching band when Harold Hill walks into it, right? Everybody dresses the same. That opening number is so great because they're all singing in unison, and they're basically talking about what assholes they are.
Oh, there's nothing halfway about the Iowa way to treat you when we treat you, which we may not do at all. There's an Iowa kind, a special chip on the shoulder, attitude we've never been without that we recall.
I mean, they're kind of taking pride in, like, we are mean, we will talk behind your back, we will, we'll give you our shirt and our back to go with it if your crop should happen to die. Like, we're gonna, like, so there is a sort of a steeliness of commitment to the community. But what the heck, like, join us at the picnic, you can have your fill of all the food you bring yourself, right? Like, we are selfish, we will not share with you, we're mean, stubborn, asshole people, and they tell you that right off the front. So there is a way in which I think, like, God, I know so many churches like that, like that real, like, white people really are that way.
Right. Well,
often.
And white, as we have talked about so many times, is really a construction. Whiteness is a construction because these are immigrants largely, Poles, German, Irish, like Mrs. Peru, who still, depending on the production, speaks with a thick Irish brogue, even though...
Well, and they're from outside. We get a couple indications that the Peru family came to River City after the... So, like, there's a... Eulalie McKechnie Shin, so she's got a little bit of Scots heritage. But yeah, I mean, the irony of the show is, I mean, how long has River City been there? Like, not longer than 50 years. They're settling in what's basically, there's... It's Indian territory, like within living memory. So of course there's no native people anywhere around. But like, River City is this weird little artificial enclave of, as you say, people from outside who have, in the course of a very short period of time, created this little caste system where, like, everybody knows their place in the community. The mayor's on top, the school board's underneath him. The women have a lot of power, but it's all sort of, around the corner. It's soft power. It's never structural power. Eulalie McKechnie Shin is in some ways the most powerful person in town, but her husband tells her to sit down, and she does. Like there's some really, it's like they have recreated a little New England white world in the middle of the frontier. And to a certain degree, I think Harold Hill, the Perus, like there are characters who sort of realize the absurdity of that. Marion, I think, has a lot of animosity. Marion is the librarian in town. She's very much a pariah. She's a bookish girl. And all of the mothers are furious with her because she's giving their girls like Chaucer, Rabelais, and Balzac, right? Like all of these like great novels that have a lot of sex in them. And the mothers are horrified, right? She advocates reading dirty books. There's a lot of stories going around town about Marion and old Miser Madison. I love the way they talk about Miser Madison. It's like, oh, Harold Hill even says like, oh yeah, the guy who like donated the library and the town square and the picnic, like that Miser Madison. They're like, yeah, who did he think he was anyway? Like basically funding this entire town. They all hate him, right? Like they hate him because apparently he was profligate in his generosity and is presumed to have had an affair with Marion the librarian. He left River City, the library building, but he left all the books to her. So they're all furious with her because she's, like she's a fallen woman. Now we can get into, right? Like, is there any truth in that story? I don't think so. Marion's, says no. My dad's best friend, old Uncle Matty, right? Who left us money to take care of me and Mom and Winthrop. Yeah, no, it was not an affair. He was kind to me. And in River City, being kind to an outsider is a cardinal sin. He suffered for it. I'm suffering for it. So the show is in a certain kind of gentle way very critical of the tight, we might even say, certainly the xenophobia of a small American community, the sexism, the rumor mongering, the gossip, and the potential racism at the heart of white America. My sense is the show is not really glamorizing that. It is treating it sometimes as a cute joke, which I suppose can be a little tricky when we know that like that world is basically one step away from a lynch mob, and that's actually exactly what happens at the end. Is there are people talking about tarring and feathering the traveling salesman who comes from outside. He's an outsider. And when it becomes clear that he is a threat to all of the little, the things that we love about our community, we are going to torture him and potentially lynch him. So there is a threat of violence that's never quite, it's always sort of latent in The Music Man. But the show does, I think, have a little bit of an agenda in terms of asking us to think a little bit critically about our nostalgic view of 19th century America.
Yeah, fair enough. And interestingly, in a Norman Rockwell-esque landscape, there's no church. There's no little church building. But there are these Eulalie Shin's plays, enactments, pageants about
pantomimes,
about historic events, including and I don't think we can find it anymore on YouTube. We've looked for it. One particularly racist one about indigenous folks who were
the Watanyi girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the only reference to indigenous life in The Music Man. That's clearly not on Meredith Willson's. He was going to do, they tried to talk him into leaving The Music Man. The producers Cy Foyer and Ed Martin tried to talk him out of The Music Man. They wanted him to do a show called Indian Trouble. And I have all kinds of questions about like what was that show? So he did not want to do Indian Trouble. Instead, he did The Music Man. So yeah, there is a little bit of a gentle. I don't think the show understands what the Watanyi girls are doing as problematic or potentially racist. I think it's sort of like, oh, ha ha ha, aren't these women silly?
It tends to be erased from most shows now. It's omitted.
I think Washington Crossing the Delaware is the new acceptable, which maybe names the sort of the patriotism and potentially the nationalism of this community in a gentler way that doesn't traffic in bad racial stereotypes. So that's a fair choice. But yeah, there are these. Yeah, there is no church. Isn't that interesting? River City
no church.
Has no church. There's actually. I mean, even when Marion prays in My White Knight, she prays to Venus. Like there's actually, this is not necessarily in any meaningful way a Christian world. I think Harold Hill plays with some religion, sure as the Lord made little green apples and that band's going to be in uniform. And he's playing with some, the devil's going to get to you. I mean, in some ways, the most obvious form of doctrinal Christianity in The Music Man, I think, is Harold Hill and the way that he kind of preaches a hellfire and brimstone sermon to these people, because there's not clearly anywhere else in River City any religious structure. It is entirely a civic structure and a kind of conformity structure that has that I can tell, no reference to any sort of church community or religious system. It's a secular community in a certain kind of way.
And the great song, Harold Hill's great song, Trouble Right Here in River City, is really a riff on evangelical preaching.
And all week long, your River City youth will be frittering away. I say your young men will be frittering away their noontime, supper time, shore time too. Get the ball in the pocket, never mind getting dandelions pulled or the screen door patched or the beefsteak pounded. Never mind pumping any water till your parents are caught with the cistern empty on a Saturday night, and that's trouble. Yes, you got lots and lots of trouble. I'm thinking of the kids in the knickerbocker shirt-tail young ones peeking in the pool hall window after school. You got trouble. Folks right here in River City. Trouble with a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. Now I know all you folks are the right kind of parents. I'm going to be perfectly frank. Would you like to know what kind of conversation goes on while they're loafing around that hall? They'll be trying out Bevo, trying out Q-Babs, trying out tailor-mades like cigarette fiends, and bragging all about how they're going to cover up a telltale breath with Sen. One fine night, they leave the pool hall, heading for the dance at the Armory. Libertine men and scarlet women and ragtime, shameless music that'll grab your son, your daughter, with the arms of a jungle, animal instinct, mass hysteria. Friends, the idle brain is the devil's playground. Trouble, right here in River City, where the capital T and that rhymes with P and that stands for pool. We've surely got trouble. Right here in River City. Got to figure out a way to keep the young ones moral after school.
Our children gonna have trouble.
It is whooping up the crowd. It's bolstering enthusiasm.
It's Jonathan Edwards, kind of, updated the way an auctioneer might do it, talking very quickly, spitting very quick lyrics, so mesmerizing the crowd with the power of his performance. But an idle brain is the devil's playground, right? Like that's basically his message. Is he's playing the role of an evangelist it kind of inspire. It's a little bit of an American revival meeting, I suppose, right? And you see it in the film. Robert Preston's like going around the circle, like having them put their hands in the air, right? Like they're putting their hands. I mean, almost like they're being slain in the spirit. It's a charismatic moment in a certain kind of way. It's right next door to kind of faith healing or a sort of which I mean like that's a critique of the American evangelist style. Is it's basically kind of auctioneering shucksterism, right? Like it's a liar who is manipulating a crowd in order to get money out of them. So there is a way in which that level of religiosity is presented to us pretty caustically in a certain kind of way.
And God is music, really. Yeah. Music is going to be the salvation of this community. Although somebody wrote, I can't remember what review I read of Music Man, this community of people who from the very beginning sing together beautifully. why do they need a guy coming in to sell them on music? But that's willing suspension of disbelief there, you know.
It is and it isn't, isn't it? Yeah, because Iowa Stubborn is in so many ways, like, that's your first presentation of this community, which is a kind of lockstep. Now, most of the song is in unison, right?
Yeah.
I think there is a little chorale. It's actually a beautiful chorale in the middle of Iowa Stubborn. We'll give you our shirt and our back to go with it if you're crop. You know, they kind of put their hands over there. It's a little hymnic. It's I think, the only place in the song where they really sing in full 4-part harmony. But you do get the sense that this is a community that at least has a memory of singing in 4-part harmony.
Yeah.
So then, you know, I think the great transformative moment is when Harold Hill teaches the arguing school board how to become a barbershop quartet, right? He turns this, like, fractious community of 4 men into, I mean, like, basically teaches them how to sing in very tight, intricate, elaborate, pleasurable harmonies.
How can there be any sin insincere? Where is the good in goodbye, in goodbye? Your apprehensions confuse me, dear, puzzle and mystify, tell me what can be fair in farewell, dear, while one single star shines above. How can there be any sin insincere? Aren't we sincerely in love? Oh, in love.
So barbershop, I mean, think about it. Who were the barbers after Reconstruction in the United States of America? African-American men. Who champions close harmony and male singing together? African Americans. There's a couple scholarly articles about how the roots of barbershop singing are really within the African American community, adopted by the white folks, and then in a scandalous moment up until, I think, the late 1960s, the great Barbershop Association, the Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Singing in America.
Nicely done.
Thank you. Segregated African Americans could not become part of it. So again, taking, if the argument is to be believed, and I can't watch Music Man now without thinking of appropriation of the harmonies of the African American community appropriated by white men and then excluding African Americans from the association. Like Meredith Willson, I'm a big fan of barbershop. I
am too. It just does it for me. Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
it just does. My three favorite. I don't want to say favorite moments in the Music Man, but Sincere, Light a Rose, and what's the third barbershop number? Sincere, Light a Rose, and it's you on my pillow, it's you in my dream. I mean, like those, like I feel, and so much of this, right? Like this, it's 4th of July, it's a summer evening. There's these 4 men's voices carrying over the breeze. It's like I shut my eyes and it's like gas lamps and porches. It's like the image that he skates of small town America, Iowa. Like it does something to me. So like, I mean. Oh my God, it works. It also, like, there's a piece of me that's like, oh, what is that? Like, is this like Main Street Disneyland? You know, is that what I'm trying? Like, what do I think I'm remembering? Because it's not any actual memory. It's like some nostalgia for a world I never even lived in. But
well, and to celebrate Meredith Willson just for a few moments here, his ability to put tunes together. He does it more than once in Music Man. Does it with Lyda Rose and Sincere. And then does it with Goodnight, My Someone and 76 Trombones, which is basically the same song, same series of notes, just slightly. And is her song Sweet and Low, which she
Sweet
sings?
and Low, well, yeah, Will I Ever Tell You, which she sings against Lyda Rose. Yeah, those two songs are kind of
that for me is the moment, because
it's
Shirley
the
Jones
moment.
or Barbara Cook. These soaring sopranos, these brilliant voices, able to take a melody and pitch it against, match it against, juxtapose it against barbershop. I mean, it's Meredith Willson, writer of symphonies, conductor of symphonic orchestras. He knows what he's doing here. He knows he's writing great tunes, and that he's writing them about this kind of imagined Americana, that music is going to be the saving power. And the way that you can get to music is just to think it, the think method.
Yeah.
Which is Norman Vincent Peale.
I was going to say, isn't that basically like, that's basically power of positive thinking. Yeah.
Which, and there's a through line from Norman Vincent Peale to Donald Trump, because of course he and one of his wives, I think the first one, were married at the Marble Collegiate Church in New York City. Norman Vincent Peale's great pulpit for many, many years.
Yeah, Trump is sort of the inheritor of the Norman Vincent Peale. I'm sorry, Donald Trump is sort of the inheritor of the Norman Vincent Peale trajectory, in we might say American civic religion, right? Like, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. If you can make enough people believe it, then it becomes true. Truth is really a matter of popular opinion. And so, that clearly Donald Trump has taken that to the nth degree.
Well, and make America great again. I think for me, when I hear it at its best, and there's nothing good about it as far as I'm concerned, takes me back to River City, Iowa.
Yeah, that's the uncomfortable politics of the show, is that I think about, like when that film came out in 1962 and Jack Warner took out an ad in whatever, was it the LA Times or something like that? Like everybody, like basically writing into American horror at like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton cheating on their spouses on the set of Cleopatra. Like, Hollywood is so corrupt, Hollywood is so liberal, and Jack Warner saying, no. Like, what we really want is wholesome American family values. So we've made this great film that you can take your grandmother to. It's called The Music Man. And it's about the best of who we are as Americans, right? It's basically like, it's sweet, it's innocent, it's earnest. There's not a black person on screen. He doesn't quite say that.
But that's
basically,
the implication.
it's the world of segregation. It's the world where, like, all of, quote unquote, those people, you're never going to see them. They're on the other side of the tracks. Tommy Gilis is a Lithuanian boy from the other side of town, like, we maybe can create space in this town. Jack Warner obviously doesn't. As far as Jack Warner is concerned, The Music Man is selling, conservative American values, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a little, my sense of, my sense is like, that's an entirely cynical argument, right? He's just out to make a buck off of these people, but knows he can tap into this deep discomfort in 1960s. It's 1962, right? So early days of the civil rights movement. We have not yet tipped over into the violence of the late 60s. So, but like, is aware, right, of this kind of burgeoning backlash against the ways in which America is changing. And so the film of The Music Man is sort of in some ways like designed to reach those people. It is the Make America Great Again movie. Yeah. And so the politics of this film do sit real weird with me because I adore that film, right? Yeah. Like it works for me. It's a film that I've loved since the moment I saw it as a kid. And I'm also aware in the ways in which that world have become politicized do sit really weird. Because I think, The Music Man, it entertains that script. I don't think Meredith Willson intended for The Music Man to become a kind of polemic It certainly didn't intend for it to go up against West Side Story of all films, right? Like, I mean, talk about a film that, like plays right into the face of violence and racial dynamics and sexual politics in the 50s in America. But unfortunately, the ways those two shows have gotten pitted against each other puts The Music Man in the category of having to defend traditional American white values. And I don't like The Music Man having to do that. I don't think that's water that it's meant to carry.
Right. I agree. And I know there's a controversy about this, but I'm firmly on the side of the lie at the heart of it, which is that Winthrop is Mrs. Peru's son and Marion's brother. I think it's much more likely that Winthrop is Marion's son. The age difference between Marion and Winthrop, she's 30-something.
No, she's 26.
Okay, well, that's almost
they treat her like
30.
She's an old maid.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, well, it tells you a lot, right? Like, you're an old maid at 26.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Marion. I didn't mean you specifically. No, like when she comes to the footbridge, his line is, "Oh, you're 26 years too late," right? Which is basic, right? Like, so yeah, she's not old, but in 1912 Iowa, right? If you're unmarried at 26, presumably you're an old maid. But right, the age difference is that I think Winthrop is he 12? 10, 11, 12.
He's somewhere in that neighborhood.
Maybe the script never really tells us. Some of it depends on casting. Some of it depends on casting, right? I mean, Mrs. Peru is probably just, like, what is she, 45? Like, she's also not, the widow Peru. We don't really know anything about her husband. I think Marion does say, the child's father is dead, and I think she says 2 years. So if here again, right? Like, the plot holes in this thing are gargantuan. So I don't think that we're meant to. There's no like intricate backstory here that Meredith Willson has sketched out for how these characters got into this situation. They are in a musical comedy, and their job is to sing the songs that he's given for them. But there is an argument that is what you're referencing here, that given the kind of realities of American life around the turn of the century, it was not uncommon for a young girl, 16, 17, 18, 19, to become pregnant, for the family to ship her off. We didn't see her. And then when, like the next thing we knew, she had a little brother. It was like,
Not an uncommon story.
Not an uncommon story. So, I mean, the way that we have kind of, it's like, it's one of the little white lies. I'm putting scare quotes around this, right? Yeah. Like, it's one of the little white lies of whiteness, Christianity, however you, right, the patriarchy, however you want to, like, skate that thing. What was it about, I don't know how this played in non-white cultures, but it was certainly a thing in small-town America for a son of a girl to be raised as that girl's little brother. So
and
you wouldn't
took this
makes
on,
that literal.
Makes it literal. But it seems to me the hinge point here, or the question is, why would Marion fall in love with an asshole like Harold Hill, even though he sings well? And the reason that I think she falls in love with him is because Winthrop is literally saved through the power of music. Yeah. He develops an identity. He grows in confidence. He blossoms as a human being because he has a role to play. He has an instrument to play. He has a uniform to put on. He has an identity. And she, either her brother or her son, doesn't really matter. That's enough for her to give her heart to this huckster traveling salesman, Harold Hill.
He can't be all bad if he can do this for my brother. I think that's right. That is the transformational. That's when she, she has this this page that she's ripped out of the almanac that she's going to give to the mayor, right? That basically will prove that Harold Hill is a fraud. She knows he's a fraud. She knows that, like, the story he's been spinning about how he's Gary, Indiana Conservatory class of '05 is impossible because the town wasn't even founded till '06. There again, it's like, this is 1912, so like. Anyway, I'm not gonna go down into that plot hole. The years never make sense.
Never make sense.
This thing is so full of plot holes. It's not even clear to me. I mean, if we're gonna take a moment to are we gonna what is his scheme? I've never really understood what Harold Hill thinks. Like, he's gonna get them all to give him money. The band instruments arrive.
The band instruments and the uniforms he makes money on, and the scheme is...
they get them all. The scheme is that he's going to form a band. He doesn't know how to do that. So that's why he has a think system, right? Like, he rehearses them for just long enough, just singing the minuet in G. So then he gets out of town before... But it's like, it's not clear, like, where do those instruments come from? Like, how does... Anyway, the economics of this model... don't really make sense to me.
Right,
I'm willing to elide that point because I love this story and I love what it's trying to do. But it's not clear to me what his scheme is. All we need to know is he's a liar. He's not a real musician. He can't conduct. He can't even read music. So that, that becomes the transformational moment. We'll get to that, I think, in just a second, because my sense is if there's gospel in this story, it's probably the moment when he picks up the baton. But what convinces to Marion to trust him, basically, against her, right? Like, to not turn him in is when he changes Winthrop's life, right? Like, he comes down off the Wells Fargo wagon, he hands this boy the cornet that he's been longing for, and all of a sudden, like, Winthrop, who hasn't spoken a word in the whole show, oh, thither, 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 have you ever think that the tholigal thing? I mean, like, he's like exuberant, doesn't care about his list, doesn't care about anything, he's just so excited by this musical instrument, and I think really, right, like, this is a man who believes in him. Winthrop has a dad. I mean, I think that's right. It's like, this boy lost his father, whether that, who was his father? Was that old Miser Madison? We don't really know. But this kid is deep in grief, deep in trauma, isn't even speaking. And finally, Harold Hill unlocks his voice. And the kid who was, basically laughed at, my sense is bullied. Even Amaryllis, who has a crush on him, the minute he says her name, I mean, his mother, that scene, I hate that scene, when Winthrop's mom makes him lisp in front of the girl he knows is going to laugh at him, and she laughs at him, and he goes running into the house, and it's like, of course he is! Like, you all are, like, this poor kid. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, my sense is, like, Meredith Willson has a heart for Winthrop. My sense is Winthrop's story, I think, is Meredith Willson's story in some interesting ways, right? Meredith Willson, who was handed a piccolo at some early age and discovered, I can get out of a small town if I learn how to play this instrument. And he does. He lives Harold Hill's fantasy. He plays with John Philip Sousa, right? Like, becomes a musician, goes to L.A., starts writing music. Like, he gets out of River City by the power of his instrument. So my sense is, right, he understands himself to have been the bullied, misunderstood, I'm going to, like, queer kid. I don't think Meredith Willson identifies as queer, but, like, somebody who does not fit the world. And music both gives him meaning, purpose, and a way out. Yeah. And that is what Harold Hill gives to Winthrop. And that's, I think, why Marion falls in love with him.
Well, and the heart of the story originally was a boy. Winthrop was in a wheelchair and was in air quotes, a spastic. And producers, as they shopped this thing around, said, you don't want to put a kid in a wheelchair on the stage. It'll draw attention away. And so Winthrop sort of got reduced in size. His physical challenge reduced from not being able to walk or not control of his limbs to speech impediment. But I think you're right. I agree. For Harold, for Meredith Willson, Winthrop is the emotional heart of the thing. If there is gospel, it is the dignity that is bestowed upon this little boy, bullied little boy, queer little boy, whatever, who is ridiculed.
The boy who doesn't fit, right? The boy who doesn't fit in town.
Doesn't fit.
And he's given belonging and meaning, and like he gets to play in the band, like I mean there is So what kind of a redemption is that? He gets to join this dysfunctional, awful, that's I don't love that skating of it. There is something to me very gospel though in the lying, cheating. I mean, at one level, I don't want to press too hard on this because Harold Hill is a charming character and I love him. But, like, the guy is a piece of work, And there is something so interesting to me theologically that it's the huckster who saves Winthrop. Yeah. Like, isn't that, I mean, to me, what I want to say is, like, isn't that the power of the Holy Spirit, right? Like, what's the Latin for this? Ex opero operandi. This was the great Montanist controversy that, Augustine basically writing into this whole controversy where there were, I'm going way off the rails here, but there have been periods in Christianity where this has been a very, right? Like, if a priest isn't a scrupulously holy, authentic person, there is no, they're not actually a priest. And Augustine says, no, right? Like, the Holy Spirit absolutely can work through religious figures, authority figures, whatever, who are total jerks, don't believe a word of it, and are going to manipulate and lie to you. Doesn't matter. If, like, God can use the most awful people to accomplish God's work in the world. So, like, there's a piece of me that kind of wants to say, like, if there's gospel in this thing, like, it's that moment where, and so, yeah, at one level, Winthrop becomes, redeemed. I don't know, that's a strong word. I think also Winthrop redeems Harold Hill in a certain kind of way.
I think so.
Right? Like, calls forth from, and that's the only real honest conversation between Harold and any other characters in the show, is when Winthrop and Harold have that moment, and, and Winthrop says, "Are you a liar?" And he says, "Yes." Are you a big old liar? I asked him another question, and Harold looks him dead in the eye and answers him truthfully. "Yes, I am a liar." But then he says, like, "You're a wonderful kid. I always knew you were. I can see something in you." So, like, I think in that moment, what we're meant to see is that Harold actually really does feel something for this kid. It's not just a buck, or not just a way to get at his older sister, which seems to be what he's, really has his eye on here. Like, Harold actually cares about Winthrop. I think Harold sees something of himself in Winthrop and wants to be a part of this kid's life in a certain kind of way. So, discovers that he has the power to actually love someone other than himself. I think, for a guy who's, like, clearly a certain kind of a narcissist, to be redeemed by, oh my God, I actually, like, care about this kid enough to stay in town and suffer the consequences of my actions, even though, like, what they're threatening to do is tar and feather me, which is, like, could kill you, right? Like, it's next door to a lynch mob. He stays in town in order to, I guess, atone for what he's done. I guess so.
And it all comes on the Wells Fargo wagon, which I know the production in Portland, which had 4 actors or 3 actors?
Six
actors.
6 women and non-binary actors, right. Yeah, playing all their own instruments, playing all the characters. I mean, really doing it the way that Harold Wilson and Renee Wilson would do it, right? Like, it's a piano and 2 actors, and they make the thing happen. Like, there were hats, and they involved the audience. I mean, like, the production was brilliant in all kinds of conceits. But basically kind of returning the Music Man to core principles, right? Which is really, this is just kind of a show that a couple people can put on in their basement. Yeah. And the show works not in terms of the big dance numbers and the spectacle of the thing. It works in terms of the emotional heart of the music, and it's a great book. Those scripts the script is really well written. It's a well-written script. The show's just kind of raw material in some ways makes a more satisfying theatrical experience than a big American bunting, lots of clothes, lots of tap dancing. It's not really meant to be a spectacle piece. I think a piece of this, and the show wasn't, but, like, when the Music Man becomes a spectacle, it runs the risk of being a MAGA riot or something, right? Like, it runs the risk of a kind of uncomfortable nationalist escapism. But when you really focus on the core of the story, which is really Harold and Marion and Winthrop, it's a really interesting and in some ways a very clear-eyed story about the dynamics of a small town, outsiders in a small town who don't fit in, and then how they actually become the ones to save that town. So it is kind of a gospel story at the heart of a very sort of rah American 4th of July celebration of patriotism.
So it was the song Wells Fargo Wagon that brought you to tears in that production.
Well, right? There were several moments that brought me to tears in that production. But yeah, it is the moment Harold Wilson Meredith Wilson, I did the same thing you did. Meredith Wilson talks about the moment where Winthrop sings in the Wells Fargo Wagon. It's really the first moment that we see this character come alive. He's been running in and out. In this production, like, you almost never saw an actor playing because they did this thing with hats where, like, a character would be talking with a hat and then they'd step into it. So you actually, for a large part of the first act of the show, you never saw an actor inhabit the body of Winthrop. You just saw a hat that was Winthrop and different characters talking to that hat. I think at one point, one of the actors stepped into the hat for a minute and then stepped right out. I mean, basically, Winthrop was hiding. You didn't even see Winthrop on stage until this great moment. They're pushing this piano around the thing. It's the Wells Fargo Wagon, right? Just 6 people singing there, and one of them's like trying to play the fucking piano while it's, I mean, it was an amazing piece of stagecraft. It was total chaos. But then this one actor, like, steps into the Winthrop hat, stands up on top of the piano, and fucking belts. Like, and like, I'm getting choked up as I'm talking about it. Like, I don't know what it is about that. Meredith Willson talks about, like, pure theatrical magic, right? Like, when something happens in a room and it's all about bodies and something electric happened in that room, and it's like we saw Winthrop come alive, and it was like watching a resurrection, right? Like, that's right. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm getting so.
Well, no, because it's a huge moment, and what I love about what you're saying is when it's overproduced, when it's big and brassy, when it's the movie, actually, you lose the intimacy of that moment of its transformation, its resurrection, its transfiguration. It is a kid who is given dignity and worth. That's what
Oh, the Wells Fargo wagon is a
And I think that's really powerful for gay men like you and me, who were bullied and, hung out in the choir classroom, in the band room.
Yep. The band geeks of the world. We're
band
legion.
Geeks of the world unite,
Oh my God.
And Winthrop is the sign of that. And, the passage from, I think it's 2 Corinthians, I may have it wrong, Paul writing, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise, right? When you were talking about Harold Hill being a con artist, but through him, God works.
God works in this little town.
The power of love, the power of human dignity is channeled so that
they can sing in harmony. I mean, I think that's right. Like, or at least, they become a marching band. Does Salvation for White America look like a marching band? I have many questions about that as our final image, because they are just like, they're just marching. But but the town, they become a Broadway show. I mean, like, what community that I love would I not want to see doing an amazing production number? Like singing their hearts out, marching still right today,
76
there is
trombones.
76 trombones. I mean, like, I think it's kind of an image of heaven.
While 110 cornets played the air, then I modestly took my place as the one and only bass, and I oomped up and down the square.
Good night, my someone, good night, my love.
With 110 cornets right behind.
Our star is shining its brightest light.
There were horns of every shape and kind. Sweet dreams be yours, dear, if dreams there be.
While 110 cornets played the air,
I wish I may, and I wish I might. Now good night, my someone, good night.
You see it in the movie, right, where they come out of the high school in their dingy little uniforms,
and they're transformed.
They're transformed into these, these, like that, and you can see them kind of look like, oh my gosh, it really is like, I think, it's like the clothes of the resurrection that they are handed, right? Like they become themselves, they become their truest selves in kind of this, amazing, weird River City afterlife. I don't know what that is, but it is beautiful. It is beautiful to me. Now, maybe that's because I'm a white kid and I have a lot invested in sort of the nostalgia of 19th century Americana. I don't know. Like that's barbershop music works for me. So that's an image. That's an image of heaven that makes me cry. I don't know that that's a universal experience, but that is my experience.
And as the credits roll in the film, all the characters are given a moment including the barbershop quartet, who you hear sing, and the women putting on these pantomimes, and the whole thing are transformed from River City, Iowa into kind of universal, heaven, I guess,
I suppose. And they're all still themselves. I mean, I think that's kind of right. Like the Pickle-Little, they're all they're all still hanging out together.
The Pickle-Little ladies.
They're Pickle-Little, like they're all like, and their hats are still bouncing all over the, it's like they haven't, they haven't really changed. They're still just as dysfunctional as they were, but like they are filled with joy. Yeah.
Like, well, that's another one of Meredith Willson's great pairing of numbers, the Pick-a-Little, Talk-a-Little ladies and Goodnight Ladies.
Goodnight Ladies, I know. That's so good.
It's fabulous.
It's so good. It's so good. I love this show. Like the Isaac's production, the Portland production that stripped it to, like, it reminded me of why I love this show so much. And it's not the nationalism and the weird politics and the throwbackness of it. I can leave that behind. But something about this story and this music really works for me. I think it is such a strong piece of theatrical material. So I will die in a ditch for Music Man. It is a show that I really do want to defend, as tricky as it can be in some of its particulars.
So if there's a production of it in your neighborhood, go see it, even if it's bad.
Go see it, yes.
And look around on streaming services. You can find it somewhere and take a look at the film.
Maybe not on the 4th of July. Or maybe on the 4th of July. Maybe it is a good 4th of July film. Maybe it reminds us of all of the dangers potential in America and also gives us a vision for what a nation can be. I'm not gonna make it do that work for us.
What human dignity and worth might look like if it were really part of a it is
in the
still
context
a
of a community. It is still a dream, but it's a dream that's worth working for. Yeah.
Okay, until next time.
Awesome. See you next time.
The Gospel of Musical Theater is a production of Trinity Episcopal Cathedral in Portland, Oregon. Join Peter and Nathan every other Friday right here in your podcast feed, and connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at GospelofMT. Learn more and support us at trinity-episcopal.org/podcasts. See you next time.